Alright, what is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be making a video showing off a kind of cool console that I've had for a while, and I think I've shown on this channel before in kind of like an unboxing, so if I find it, I'll put it up in the top corner here. This is one that's a relatively popular one. A lot of people kind of know about it, but hopefully I can give a little bit more insight, open it up, show you guys kind of what it looks like on the inside. But that is the Nintendo iQue player. This was kind of a weird variant of the N64 that Nintendo actually released super late. If I remember correctly, this was around, 2004 was when this specific unit was produced. I believe they went up to like 2007, 2008 until they were eventually discontinued. This is a full official Nintendo console, and it's basically just a kind of a hardware clone of a Nintendo 64 in a very small package, and it was made specifically for the Chinese market. So a little bit of backstory on why they needed to make this. So at some point in either the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it might have even been 2000, China put a just blanket ban on video game consoles as a whole. It was because they were kind of afraid that people would get addicted to video games, and young people would be a lot less productive, basically. So they banned video game consoles, but because that ban only specified consoles, video games were actually still perfectly fine and legal to play. You just couldn't get a Nintendo GameCube or a Wii or anything like that. But there's some loophole. This is not considered a game console. I believe it's considered a handheld, which is still fine because Nintendo was still making the DS. As you can see right here, this is actually an iQue branded DS Lite, also from China. And this was released around that time. I believe this was like 2005, 2006. So handheld consoles were still perfectly fine. And that's kind of why this is in this weird plug-and-play form factor, because this is not technically a game console, doesn't have cartridges, doesn't have a disc slot. This was still perfectly fine under that new law. So if you don't have cartridges or discs or anything like that, might be wondering how you put games on this. Basically, every single one of these systems would have this little memory card on it, which slides out from the bottom. Looks kind of similar to an N64 memory card. Not quite the same, but similar kind of size, at least up here. And you could take that memory card to different kiosks that were put in a bunch of different stores and locations, slot the memory card in, and then it would let you download a bunch of games that were available. Every single game, to my knowledge, was fully translated and re-released for the Chinese market. So I know Ocarina of Time had a few changes because over there things like skulls aren't allowed in a lot of media. I know skulls are a big thing, but like certain things that are depicted in games aren't quite allowed over there or are seen differently, so they actually made some cool changes to the games. So playing through them is pretty interesting because you see these little minuscule differences that they've made during translation. But all of the games were translated and made specifically for this system for the Chinese market. But you'd basically go up to a kiosk, put the memory card in, buy the game for probably the equivalent of a few bucks, and you would have it loaded directly onto your iQue. So then you take it home, plug it in, and you can play. So a few years later, they actually released something called iQue at Home, which lets you load games on a computer instead of having to go to a kiosk. I assume it functioned in a similar way. You would just put in whatever your credit card information was on their website or through their program, buy the game, and then it would automatically transfer using this little USB connection up here. So it's pretty neat. It kind of reminds me of the way that they were distributing Famicom Disk System games in Japan, where you could technically buy the actual discs and with games already on them, but they also had kiosks where you could go around and actually slot it in, download a game, have it overwrite. One other thing you might have noticed from looking at this, that it does not have any sort of video out or battery slot or anything like that. The reason why is because this actually runs fully off wall power, and everything is controlled through this little connector down here, I guess big connector. This is one of the more annoying things about getting an iQue player, because the majority of the ones you're going to find for a good price don't have the original cable, and it is proprietary. So there are some ways that you can make your own, but it's not exactly the easiest process. And without it, it's pretty much a brick. This is the end of the cable that goes into the system here. You can see it's very similar to the original Xbox plug. It's just a little shorter. That's actually what people use to make their own custom connectors. So they'll take an OG Xbox AV cable, they'll kind of trim it partially and then solder some of the connectors, and it does work. These systems also have S-Video, which was never officially used as far as I can tell, but they do have the pinout for it. So when you make a custom cable, you can actually get a little bit better video quality compared to the stock ones. But you can see on the other end, we have your normal composite video out, and then there's also a DC jack here, and that's what you plug your power adapter in. So it's a little strange having that all on one cable, but I guess it works. Before I plug this in, kind of show you around the menu, I will take it apart and kind of show you what the internals look like. With how much Nintendo loves using their security bits, I am very surprised that everything here is just standard Phillips. Because for most of their stuff, at the very least, they'll use tri-wing screws, if not their full, like, game bit, I think it's called. Alright, so we have all 8 screws taken out. We'll remove the memory card, and then in theory, this should just lift right off. Oh, one of the screws wasn't fully loose. Okay. So you can see the back lifts off. You have to be careful because those triggers are connected. All those screws are going to fall out, that's fine. Thankfully, they all use the same screws for the whole back, so you don't have to worry about putting them in the correct orientation. But from here, you can kind of see the back half of the board, and there's just a couple more screws to get to actually lift the whole thing out. This little ribbon cable in here is just clipped onto the back of the thumbstick. Thumbstick is relatively easy to replace if you ever need to, although I'm not sure exactly how easy or difficult it is to get that part. It looks very similar to the original Nintendo 64 thumbstick, but most likely it's going to be a little bit different, so I would try to keep this intact. It actually feels a little bit better than the normal N64 one. I'm curious if there's a way to retrofit this onto a 64 controller, but with how kind of hard these are to find, I really wouldn't want to do that personally. And with this final screw, we now have the board completely taken out. Gonna leave all the buttons and everything there because that's pretty standard for a normal controller. And now you can see what the top half of the board looks like. So I've got all the contacts and everything for all the buttons. I believe the actual CPU is going to be under this little heatsink. Let me see if I can remove it without having to desolder. There we go. Yep. So right here you've got, the processor. I'm assuming that's memory. Everything like that. So that is what it looks like. It also has a battery on it to keep your saves and everything going. Not sure exactly what kind of battery that is. Hopefully it's something you'd be able to get if you need to replace it. There is surprisingly a lot of information about these online. There is a whole website called iQue Brew, and on there you can get a bunch of tutorials and just information in general about fixing these or modifying them, basically anything you'd want to do to one. People have found some unreleased ROMs for like Chinese translations of different games. I think Majora's Mask is a pretty popular one that people may have heard about, but you can actually load those onto this with a special program that kind of uses the system that was put in place for the iQue at home. And through that, you can load kind of whatever you want on here. I know there are some issues with certain games that weren't specifically designed for it, but at the very least, you can put other iQue ROMs on here if yours didn't have it loaded already. So I'm just going to get this thing put all back together, and I will continue actually showing you what the system looks like and how it works in just a couple minutes. Okay, so have everything hooked up and ready to go. To turn it on, you have the start button, and then right above there's this black power button. You actually have to press and hold it for a second. If you just press it once, it usually doesn't start up. So press and hold it until that green light comes on. And then you should see in a couple seconds, the actual menu will pop right up. All right, here we go. So I will be using Google Translate to kind of read what's on screen because I don't speak, because I do not know Chinese. Okay, so right now on screen, it's just giving me a warning saying that I didn't press and hold the power button last time I turned it off. So just saying if you do that, it'll lose data. Right here we have the menu, and you have two options. On the top it says game, on the bottom it says manage. So let's go down to manage and see what's here. We have the clock. There's a passcode that you can set on the system. Thankfully mine is just 0000. It set game time. I'm assuming that's like a parental controls thing, so they can say like, hey, you can only play this long, I assume. And then password expiration time. I don't really know what that is. Going into the top option, which I believe was just game, you now have this screen here, which shows you all of the games that you have loaded onto the system. So for me, I have Star Fox, Wave Race, Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, and Dr. Mario. And as far as I know, I believe these are all fully on the system, because you could also get demos and trials, and those would only have a limited amount of plays. So these are actually full version of the game, to my knowledge. Down at the bottom, you also just have, it tells you like how much storage space is taken up by that little red square. If it has a yellow square, that means that it's a trial. So them being red, in theory, means that it's the full game. If you press the Z button, which is kind of the lower trigger on the left side. Weirdly, it's only on the left, not on the right, but I guess it makes sense because there was only one Z button. This is showing, I believe, save data for the different games. So let's just go through. Let's pick Mario 64 because it's, it's something that should be pretty easy to go through if I don't know the language. And here we are. So this is the same Mario 64 menu that you know. You can do all the weird effects and things like that. Let's go to start. You can see there's actually some files on here with different amounts of playtime. I've played a little bit on this, but these accounts are not all mine. I think mine might be C, if I remember correctly. So actually someone used this, which is pretty cool. As you can see, the video quality is definitely not great. To be fair, Nintendo 64 in general isn't super amazing. The S-Video would help a lot, but this is composite. Don't expect it to look any different than a normal N64. It would be really nice with the time that this came out if it somehow had HDMI. That would be really interesting, but it's basically just a Nintendo 64. So I believe to exit the game, you just press the power button once. It kind of does like that little transition, and then there we go. We're back at the menu. So let's go Ocarina of Time. This message here, I actually translated it a while ago to put on my website. It's pretty much just giving you like a warning saying don't turn off the power or everything like that. And by the way, I haven't talked about it much on my channel. I've mentioned it a few times in my other videos, but I do have a website where I post articles and things about a bunch of the different consoles I own. So if you want a little bit more in-depth information, internal pictures, kind of details about when it came out, how much it originally cost, all of that kind of stuff, check that out. I will put a link down in the description. You can see here, slot 3 is one that I made. So let's go into that because hopefully I should be, I'm past the initial cutscene. But yeah, this entire game, including all the dialogue and everything, is also translated, which is super cool. So another thing, just kind of as a cool little fun fact, there are actually a few speedruns where using the iQue player could get you a little bit of a better time. Now, there's probably other tricks and things that offset that, but I know for a while, I believe Ocarina of Time actually, the iQue player was the optimal system or platform to play on. And that, I believe, was because of the text, because it being in Chinese means less characters, it loads faster. And also, I believe just the way that the system is built, it actually loads areas and things ever so slightly faster. It's nothing that would be really noticeable, but for a while that was kind of the meta to use one of these for speedrunning, which is pretty neat. So we'll exit out here. Let's just do a little bit of Star Fox also. Why not? Star Fox is a really interesting one because it actually has voice acting in Chinese. So instead of the other games, which are all just text, basically, this one is actually fully translated and voiced. So you can hear Chinese Fox McCloud, which is pretty cool. And the voice acting and the emotion that they put into it is actually like pretty good. Like it legitimately sounds like there was a lot of effort put in. And something that I didn't even really mention much, but the layout of the buttons, for how weird the Nintendo 64 controller is, them being laid out in more of a normal orientation still feels perfectly fine. And I know there's a few different controllers, like I believe the Brawler 64 it's called. There's a few controllers that are in this kind of form factor, and they work pretty well. It is kind of neat to see an official controller that's not that weird kind of three-prong design from Nintendo. But yeah, I mean, that is pretty much it. From this point, it's basically just a Nintendo 64 with preloaded games. It is just a really cool and interesting system to have, because it is one of those things where if you've never seen it before, you would think that this is like a clone. It doesn't look like something that was actually licensed by Nintendo, but it was. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video at all, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Retro Game Con was earlier this month, about a week ago from recording this, so be on the lookout for my monthly pickups at the end of the month, because I did pick up some really cool stuff from there. But yeah, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my website, like I said, down in the description if you want a little bit more info about this or some of the other systems that I own. And stay tuned for more videos on kind of cool, weird, obscure systems I've got. But anyway, that's about it. So I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.